Hello everyone, welcome back to 10 Forward. I'm your host Mike Overton, and in this week's episode we are looking into Season 2, Episode 4 of Strange New Worlds, Among the Lotus Eaters. Let's hit it. The episode starts with a joint star mapping mission between the USS Cayuga and the USS Enterprise. Captain Batel and Captain Pike attempt a nice homely romantic meal for two, but unfortunately this gets interrupted by various crew members from both ships. Captain Batel gives Captain Pike a pendant, but the happiness fades when Captain Pike finds out that Admiral Pasolk has obstructed Batel's promotion. Guilt-ridden with this, Pike becomes quite withdrawn and distant, and the two essentially stop the meal and end on not so great terms. The USS Enterprise gets tasked with a mission to Rigel 7, where Captain Pike had previously lost 3 crew members. Now, they discover a palace which has been adorned with a Starfleet Delta, a reminder of their past visit. Una provides a staff briefing offering Pike solace and a little bit of relationship advice. An away team is formed with Captain Pike, Ortegas, La'an Noonien Singh, and Dr. M'Benga. Now, Ortegas is ecstatic about assuming the identity of a Kalanar inhabitant, but Spock reveals the presence of a debris field which is going to require her expertise to fly the Enterprise through. This time, the away mission has been equipped with only period-appropriate technology. The reason why Pike selected La'an and M'Benga for this mission is the fact that they're not going to be able to have phasers and are going to require hand-to-hand combat. Now, once they're on the planet, La'an is the first to notice that she's got a ringing in her ears and intermittent gaps in her perception of time. Now, they push forward to the palace and discover it being embellished with a giant Starfleet Delta. It also turns out that the guards are wielding Federation phaser rifles. Perhaps Pike should feel a little guilty for leaving behind artifacts from this previous mission, but before long they're apprehended and brought before the palace's leader, who turns out to be one of the three crew members who were killed in the previous away mission. He dismisses any mention of the report of his death, and this former Starfleet officer, who now wears a crown, insists on only being addressed as High Lord Zacharias. Now, the garden sculpture wasn't a message. The locals worship him and his symbols, and he is wearing his Federation uniform with a Starfleet insignia on. In essence, he's become essentially a sort of Lord of the Manor, and the ringing in the ears is an initial symptom of local radiation poisoning, which Zachariah eagerly anticipates watching his former captain endure. The away team regain consciousness outside of the palace and have been confined to a cage. They're also struggling to recollect their surroundings and essentially even their own identities. The disconcerting ringing phenomenon has now spread to the crew of the Enterprise, and Uhura is the first to report to sick bay, which alarms Chapel, who now has observed an obstruction in the communication officer's neural pathways. Before long, other crew members start experiencing the same symptoms as the away team on the ground. Now, recognizing that an exotic radiation from the planet is the most logical cause, Mr. Spock swiftly distributes pads to each of the critical personnel on the ship. On board each pad is essentially their personnel file that explains who they are and what their role is. The away team gets some help from a local field Kalar named Luke, who can see that they've had a rough forgetting, which is the process each night where a Kalar loses their most recent memories. But Luke believes that this is nothing some hard labour won't address, and essentially takes them to the stone quarry. Now, Luke's a nice guy, but Pike isn't really buying this whole "our work is a blessing" stuff. Holding on to the pendant that Batel gave him earlier on, Pike senses that him and his companions aren't the manual labour type. With, there's no calluses or hardened skin on their hands, and perhaps that they belong at the palace. And this palace is said to be protected from the nightly mind wiping. Soon enough, Captain Pike overpowers the guards, but La'an gets seriously wounded, and Mbenga knows that he is able to fix her, but just can't remember exactly how. Luke takes them back to their home, where he reveals his totem, which, along with some memento-style sort of tattoos, help center him and gives the group some insight into the local mythology. Now, Luke's biggest belief is that whilst you forget the details of your everyday life, emotion carries through, so he's moved by Pike's need to return to whoever gave him the pendant, as well as his conviction to save La'an. Now, he agrees to help get Mbenga's memory back, but as they near the palace, Luke elects to stay behind with La'an, as he is afraid to remember his own personal pain and loss. After another loss of time, Captain Pike and Dr. Mbenga find themselves fighting the gate guards, where Mbenga gets grazed by a phaser. Now, the Doctor will hold off the gates at the guard as Pike goes in alone and goes to get those memories, which are apparently kept in a box or something. Going back to the ship, things are not very focused, and Spock and Ortegas find themselves on the bridge with a load of alarms blaring, with no idea of where they are, who they are, or even how to read the pads that have got the answers on. After arguing with the irritated Vulcan, Erica leaves, and the helpful lady, aka the ship's computer voice, in the turbolift takes her home, guiding her along the corridor with illuminated panels, and essentially helps her get back to her quarters, where she just wants to stop the rocks being the asteroids battering against the Enterprise's hull. Her conversation with this ubiquitous voice only confuses her until the ship asks about plotting a course. Now, this kind of informs her that she could be a pilot. Now, using this very cool mantra, which I like, which is, "I'm Erica Ortegas and I fly the ship." And this helps her focus that, that she has a job to do and that she's the only one that can address the rocks. Now, she's determined and returns back to the bridge, telling the befuddled Spock that she knows what to do and how. Offering only encouragement and, a bit of backseat driving, as most Vulcans do, he sits by and watches Ortegas' instincts take over, as she, deftly removes their way through the debris field with some impressive flying, and that includes using the phasers to blast a bloody great hole through a very big rock. Pike fights his way through the palace and essentially starts shouting at Zach, demanding these secret casket of memories, but the self-entitled, self-made High Lord essentially just laughs at Pike and tells him, "You've really fallen for that totem nonsense." Now, a short bit of backstory. An asteroid hit the planet thousands of years ago with a daily memory-wiping radiation, but the palace is made from a stone that protects the Kalar leaders, so they put it into their helmets and turned it all into this sort of mythology to keep the rest of the population and workers in line. Now, Zach thought that it would be a laugh to have his former captain, wander around aimlessly around the planet as a field Kalar, and thinks that it's pretty funny that Pike fell for this whole, fairy tale mumbo jumbo. But with a phaser rifle pointed at his head, the former crewman sort of calls it backsies and, steps back. Now, Pike finally starts to remember that he's a Starfleet captain who doesn't randomly kill people. He feels bad for having left Zach behind, but there will be consequences for taking over a planet with Federation technology. You can't just go wandering into a planet with a bunch of phasers and, take it over. Soon enough, La'an is fixed up by Dr. Mbenga with essentially more supplies that were left behind by the first landing party. It's nice to see that Luke has come inside and has no regrets over the rediscovered loss of his wife and son, because, as he said, some memories are worth the pain. Back on the ship, all is kind of well. Spock has created a shield algorithm that will protect them from the radiation, which turns out was coming from the debris field that he sent them into in the first place. With Captain Pike back on the ship, and he wants to set things right, so he orders Ortegas to grab the asteroid off the planet and fling it away safely. Now, I do get season 3 of Picard vibes here, where they use a tractor beam to grab an asteroid and fling it away, but it's a very cool scene. Now, there was a brief discussion about the Prime Directive, but, naturally they just ignore it. Wrapping things up, Pike engages a rendezvous with the USS Cayuga and the dubious Captain Batel. Now, she wavers as he apologises, and essentially for being an arse, and his time on Rigel 7 and how that pendant centred him and guided him through the entire ordeal has kind of given him a bit more of a bonded strength as captain. So, of course, she forgives him, and the episode ends with a little secret that I'm not going to tell you about until you've watched it. One of my favourite moments from this episode is the scene where Ortegas is in her quarters. She gets very scared by the rocks or the asteroids, battering the hull of the Enterprise, but finds some solace in the computer's voice, and essentially with that overcomes her fear and battles through and essentially fixes the situation by flying the ship through the asteroid belt. The whole sort of B scene, the B storyline of this is, Ortegas overcoming her fears, and I think it's a really great addition to this episode. So I feel this episode feels a little bit short of embracing its own ideas. The episode's nostalgia for 90s television sort of outweighs its understanding of the limitations of that era. It highlights how the show's format restricts great characters like Ortegas, denying them from, developing and growing. Ortegas is portrayed as a job description rather than a fully realised character, reduced to sort of a walking embodiment of a pilot of the ship. The episode attempts to sort of present this as a sort of heroic moment, and it begins with Ortegas expressing, boredom of flying the ship, but ends with her triumphantly declaring that I am Erica Ortegas and I fly the ship. However, this sort of arc is frustrating because it sort of reinforces the notion that Ortegas can never be more than the role as the Enterprise's pilot, and I think that's disappointing, especially in an episode that explores the idea of, a person being more than just one's job. The nostalgia-driven approach, it sort of adds to the core themes of Strange New Worlds, and it's consistently prioritising that sort of familiar over unfamiliar and old over the new, and recurring message is that everyone should find happiness in their current circumstances. Characters like La'an and Una and they may temporarily depart the ship or face challenges, but they inevitably return, and Strange New Worlds acknowledges its shortcomings, yet struggles to overcome them. For Ortegas, flying the ship seems to be her predetermined role, and it's unlikely that she'll ever get to sort of transcend this position. Her only hope lies in accepting it as a blessing, as the show suggests. This episode challenges that famous Star Trek trope that the red shirt always dies, and explores what happens if one of them survived. This concept that's usually played out for laughs is used in this episode to emphasise the absence of a reset button and the importance of consequences. The episode also delves into a theme of ageing and bittersweet nature of memories, and Luke, who's experienced loss, he initially sees that forgetting as a blessing. However, he does ultimately realise that memories, even the painful ones, enrich life. This episode ultimately celebrates the significance of memories and the beauty found in embracing both joy and sorrow. This is a great episode, and I really do like it, even though it's slow in places. It's definitely worth a watch, and I sort of would give it sort of 4.5 out of 5 stars here. The episode also delves into the theme of aging and the bittersweet nature of memories, as Luke, who's experienced loss, initially sees forgetting as a blessing. However, he ultimately realizes that memories, even the painful ones, enrich life, and this episode ultimately celebrates the significance of those memories and the beauty that's found in embracing both joy and sorrow. Thanks everyone for tuning in to this week's episode of 10 Forward. If you'd like to catch up with more Clone Star podcasts, don't forget you can tune in every Wednesday to The War Room, hosted by the phenomenal Sean Ferrick here on YouTube and your favourite podcasting platforms from 10:30am UK time. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more incredible content. And once again, I've been your host, Mike Overton. Thanks very much and have a great week ahead.